So, something that makes Life is Strange really special to me and a lot of other fans is its focus on story and character. We loved experiencing its coming-of-age tale, and we adore its main cast. But something that makes the story of Life is Strange and its short sequel demo Captain Spirit really special is the way the environment tells a huge part of that story. Tons of small details that might not seem like much at first glance, but bring a lot of rich depth and detail to the world these characters inhabit and to themselves. Season 1 had a lot of these examples that I'll explore another time, so for a few moments today, I'd like to show you some of these examples in Captain Spirit. A good place to start would be right here in Chris's room, and glancing around, we can see a number of details in the walls and the floors that, again, don't seem like much at first, but reflect what we learn in the story. There's multiple stains on the carpet from spills not being cleaned up, crease marks that haven't been fixed from it being moved around a lot, probably by Chris while playing, chipped paint on the walls, marks on the wardrobe doors, dirty smudges on the windows, cracks on the ceiling and the walls where the curtain has been installed, which is a nice realistic detail. His basketball ring is missing its net, his toy guitar is missing a string, his playbox has been broken for some time now. Chris's room isn't in the greatest shape ever, and sure, a 9-year-old boy's room isn't going to be the cleanest place on earth, that's fair enough, but it's the lack of maintenance that we can see all throughout this incredibly detailed environment that expands on what we learn about the relationship between Chris and Charles in the story. Both of them are experiencing grief from the loss of their wife and mother, Emily Erickson. Charles has chosen to deal with this grief with alcohol, neglecting to take care of basic cleaning and maintenance of his home. We generally see this with him leaving beer cans, old food, and pizza boxes throughout the house, but this kind of neglect also leaks into Chris's room, leading to all these details we see everywhere. On top of all of that, details like chipped paint and cracks in the ceiling reflect what we learn about the financial situation with Chris and Charles. This home in Beaver Creek, Oregon is where they've had to move after Charles couldn't keep up with payments on their original house. Probably because Charles lost his job as a coach due to his aggressive behavior and a recent incident involving beer cans in the pool after hours, leading to him working for the railroad at probably less income, leading to him moving into this older, more rundown house. Charles's alcoholism is not only why he's neglecting these problems in Chris's room, it's the reason this room is Chris's room. And now, rather than spend what little money he probably earns fixing and cleaning up these things, he decides to instead spend it on alcohol and bet it on the basketball game he's watching, as we can hear in this dialogue.
Come on, I got money on this.
So already, so much of what we learn about and witness within the story is being told through the environment. And I think this is the mark of some really great game making. The environment isn't just where the action takes place and you fill it with relevant stuff, it's an opportunity to give the story more depth and scope, enhancing both aspects. Now, besides all the things in Chris's room that enhance the shittier aspects of his life, we'll come back to those later, there's some other neat details, both narrative and technical wise, that I really liked. Chris's favorite book, Where the Strange Things Went, has a lot of these marks and stains on it, which reinforces the fact that it's his favorite book. It shows that he's taken it out and read it a lot, rather than just keeping it on the bookshelf all nice and clean. We can also see a note from Chris's friend Hal, indicating that Chris has lent him the book in the past. So that's also probably why it's a little stained. This little drawing on Chris's pencil case also appears on Max's pencil case. I'm not sure how or why I picked up on this detail, but here you go. Chris's toy water gun actually reflects part of the environment, which was pretty surprising to see, which, on that note, I mentioned in a previous video that I made before Captain Spirit released that I was really impressed with the reflections on the TV. However, looking at them closely now, you can see that it's not quite right. I don't think mirrors work this way. And lastly, if you take a closer look at the textures on some of Chris's toys, you can actually see some fingerprints on them, both on the toys we see at the start of the game and on this stick figure that Chris can play with later. This is kind of a weird detail to point out because if you look closely at Chris's fingers, he actually doesn't have fingerprints. Checkmate, developers. Regardless, I still think it's a pretty cool detail. Moving on from Chris's room and coming back to more of that environmental detail, one room that really reinforces the bleak situation between these two, mostly Charles's neglect to clean the house, is the bathroom. It's pretty gross when you look at it closely. There's mold and scum stains in the bathtub and wall tiles, mold that's starting to grow on the ceiling bit by the window and above the shower head, toothpaste that's built up along the edges of the mirror, which I thought was a pretty cool, realistic detail. Looking at the paint outline behind it, it looks like there was actually a much bigger mirror there at some point. Toilet paper rolls and toilet paper that's just been discarded when there's a bin like right there. Every surface in this room just looks muddy and filthy. It's really great detail, touching on what I was mentioning before about reinforcing the story, but man, it is not pretty to look at. So let's move on quickly and go to Charles's bedroom. Much like Chris's room, there's a lot of detail here that shows the age of the house and Charles's neglect to maintain it. A lot of the wallpaper is damaged, it's tearing and falling apart, you can even see air bubbles under it. There's more paint coming off from the ceiling, black mold on the wall near the window, which also has smudges, marks left on the ledge by Charles and is smoking. He's left his clothes on the ground and it looks to me pushing them further under the bed to hide them from view, which is totally a rookie move. You hide them under the mattress for ultimate laziness. More beer cans left here and there, more stains on his bedside table and his bed. All in all, things aren't super great in here in terms of maintenance. I've mentioned in the past that bedrooms in Life is Strange provide a great insight into the character who inhabits them. They just ooze their personality in a number of great ways. But Charles's room is different. I think rather than exhibiting his personality, instead it reflects the kind of problems he's experiencing in life now. He's torn and broken, and he needs a bit of care. A cool little detail that I really like about Charles's room is the small drawing on the wall that Chris has made for him. And just to the right of it, this area where a picture used to be. I didn't really make anything of this at first, but I think it's a great visualization for Charles. With the death of his wife, Emily Erickson, there's a large part of him missing. He still has Chris, which is good, but a larger reminder of what used to be there still lingers. It's still a very visible part of the room, and a very visible part of Charles. Anyway, looking at the brighter side, there's some other neat details in Charles's room to pick up on, like this box on the chest drawer that has some random USB cable sticking out. I'm sure everyone has this box in their home somewhere. That, apart from my metaphorical theory about the missing picture, you can actually see it stashed behind the same chest drawer. I tried all kinds of ways to see what it actually is, but unfortunately it's pretty well hidden. This next one isn't exactly the kind of environmental detail I'm talking about, but when you pick up Charles's pants, take them to the laundry and put them in the washing machine, a little note will fall out of his pocket with a name and number. Calling the number will play out this interaction.
Welcome to Kitty Club. Meow. Odessa speaking.
Oh. Hi?
You sound like you're looking for a kitty cat tonight.
My dad won't let me have a cat, but I would love...
Your dad? What? Christ, who is this? How old are you? Hello?
Going back to Charles's room, we can find a letter from Audra, who wrote the note from before, and judging by her tiny dancer line and the fact that her number goes straight to the kitty club rather than her personal phone, it's pretty safe to assume that she works at this club, and that something has been going on between her and Charles for a while now. I won't go too in depth on this, but it's an interesting insight into this side of Charles's life, and something that's easily missed if you don't go into his room early. And lastly, this chair. We use it to take a peek at some interesting story stuff in Charles's closet, but coming back to those cigarettes we can see on the window ledge, it's pretty clear that Charles sits at this chair and smokes. What's a little more wholesome to me though, is that the chair is positioned in such a way that Charles would have a perfect view of Chris playing in his treehouse or battling it out with Snowmancer. Sure, he could just be admiring the beautiful scenery most of the time, but I'd like to think that he's at least keeping a fatherly eye on Chris while he's playing outside. Brings a more positive spin on this whole corner of his room. The last few rooms to look at is of course the main room, the kitchen, and everything in between. First off, we can find a lot of the same detail we see in the bedrooms that, again, reinforces the age and state of the house. More cracks in the walls and on the ceilings, some more chipped paint on the edges, more black mold growing on the ceiling, most of the usual stuff. But then, you find some really neat specific detail, like the scrapes and scratch marks on this wall in the laundry, indicating that Charles and probably Chris have moved some big objects through here, had some trouble with the tight space, and scraped the walls. The dead flies in the light fixture above the ceiling, the small crumbs of food left on the kitchen table from Chris's breakfast, and the crumbs left on the coffee table from Charles's pizza, the multiple stains on both of these objects from previous meals, indicating that not much cleaning gets done when a mess is made, which you can also see in the eggshells and paper towels that Charles has just left on the kitchen bench. The kitchen also has a lot of the same worn out texture details that we see throughout, with chipped paint, black marks everywhere, and some simple but nice variety in the wood textures. Which, building on from that, I really love just how much detail there is in the floor textures. Every square inch isn't just this plain floor with different colors here and there. Instead, you really get a sense that there's a history behind every individual bit of detail, and much like everything else we've found, it goes a long way to making this environment feel truly lived in. A few more cool details that I spotted here and there are things like how the light from the TV and the window is reflected off the floorboards, how Charles's slippers has the same team logo as the one on his hat in the trophy cabinet. Guy really loves his sports ball. How Chris's toys are everywhere throughout the house if you look hard enough. While I think this isn't a totally bad thing, kids leave their toys around the place all the time, I can definitely imagine a scenario in the future with Charles stepping on one of these toys one day and having an outburst at Chris, which really wouldn't be cool, and I think Charles should be the one reminding Chris to put all his toys away in the first place. Regardless, I think it's a pretty nice detail. And finally, we have outside, this large, beautiful area unlike anything we've seen in previous Life is Strange games. Now, for the last part of this video, I figured rather than go through the same similar texture detail we find all over the place, because I think you get the idea now, I'll instead talk about 3 final details that I want to share here. This small broken hole in Charles's garage that leads outside has this small trail in the snow just under it. Following that trail leads us to find who's been coming in and out and visiting. If you take a look at Charles's truck, you can see that he only has one windscreen wiper, which, if you head over to Snowmancer, one of Captain Spirit's arch nemesis, you can see that Chris has repurposed it into one of his arms, along, it seems, with a number of other items left by his father here and there. And finally, going back to the garage, you'll obviously notice the large amount of stuff in boxes that's being kept in here. We know that Charles had lost his previous home and moved to Beaver Creek, Oregon due to financial difficulty. And I think what all this stuff can tell us is that their previous home was much larger than where they are now. I'd be willing to bet that half of their life is still packed up in these boxes because there's no more room in their now smaller house. Something else to note in here is that there's quite a few boxes labeled books. We learn throughout the story that Chris's mother, Emily Erickson, was a bookworm. It's mentioned by Charles that she was always reading while sitting next to him. She met him in a library of all places, and she's bought Chris a number of books and comics and told him to never throw them out. So it's safe to assume that she owned a lot of books as well, and all the boxes we find reinforce that. I also think it's another great representation of Emily's presence throughout Captain Spirit. She's been deceased for a while now in terms of the story, but in some form or another, she's always there, either in conversation or notes that she's written, or in the detail in the environment. This particular kind of detail reminds me a lot about Rachel Amber's presence throughout Season 1, a character we never actually meet or see, yet has had a visible impact on the world around her, and has left a ton of reminders of her presence. Something that, again, I'll have to investigate in the future. So, thanks for watching. If there's one thing I hope this video does, it's showcase one of the many reasons why I love this series, and why I'm excited for Life is Strange 2, because I have no doubt we'll be seeing this level of detail again later on in September. Until then, I hope to have another video out talking about some more Season 2 stuff that I may have missed in my previous video, some details regarding the comics, this in-universe book that just got announced, and much more. Until then, thanks again for watching, and have a great day.